Let's talk non-physical, non-physical. Let's talk non-physical. Let's talk non-physical. Let us have some spirit talk. Some spirit talk. Let us have some spirit talk.
I think one thing to mention, I think one thing to mention as well about Matt Dillahunty, he was friends with the mentalist James Randi.
Yes.
And James Randi had this show where he welcomed anyone to prove the paranormal, and if you could do it, then you would win $1 million. And along the years, nobody was ever able to prove it. In fact, some frauds were uncovered. And because Matt Dillahunty is also influenced by James Randi, because Matt Dillahunty used to be a magician himself. That's another thing that we didn't mention before. He would say that, so far there's a lack of evidence. But then again, I don't know of an experiment like the one you've just described involving several people experienced in, psi phenomena on the show. That maybe that's something that they could try and.
So a lot of people who claim to be very good at it were often annoyed by all the conditions of that prize, that $1 million prize, and so they were kind of turned off by it. Several years ago, Gary Schwartz, who I've probably mentioned before, he did a series of experiments, actually sponsored in part by HBO. I know it sounds terrible, which is in our country, it's a cable channel, where he brought in some of the best mediums in the world, and he tested them. And they did two different setups. One setup they did where the person was the medium and the sitter were opposite of each other, and the medium and the sitter could only say yes or no answers to questions. And they did that with 5 different mediums, 5 different sitters, and then what they did is they took all the results and they asked people to link up what they thought was the medium's result, because it showed that the medium said it was her grandpa, and match it up with the sitter to see how well they could match up those 5 people. And they found that that all of the mediums were doing about twice as good as chance in terms of identifying different relatives and stuff like that compared to all the other relatives. And then they did a second experiment where they asked the sitter to be quiet and not say anything. And the results were slightly worse, but they still were significant. In other words, the medium seemed to be picking up information, and he wrote a whole book on this. It's called The Afterlife Experiments. And then, of course, he presented his data to the skeptics, and of course, the skeptics started, hitting him with hammers and doing all this stuff. But Schwartz from that point on said, "Hey, I'm convinced," and so he sort of changed the study. Instead of saying, let's try to keep proving this, to, let's just move forward and see what we can learn about this phenomenon. So I think skeptics will always deny the information that's presented to them because that's their chosen, mode of thinking. But
it's reasonable doubt, isn't it? They call it reasonable doubt. Do you think?
And if you want to do that, you're free to. And that's another point which I wanted to bring up, which is that the system that we're in is designed to allow you to do that. In other words, it is so well patched up, it is so secure that unless you either have a near-death experience or you're really, really curious, you can go through your entire life and believe that the illusion that you're living in is real. It's designed to be that way. It's designed to be as real as possible so that you don't question it. And so that's why it's so difficult to prove it, in my opinion, is because it was designed that way.
Do you think in science, right, because they have to use skepticism in science, do you think in science they use more falsificationism? You know what Karl Popper said, in order to see how strong your theory is, you must try to prove it wrong. So do you reckon when it comes to the claims coming from parapsychology that scientists in the mainstream scientific community tend to use falsificationism more when it comes to what they deem to be outlandish claims than when they have their own theories about the mundane world? You know, say if it's a theory that they've got to try and explain gravity, quantum gravity, you know, they come up with like mathematical models, and they take a look at all the laws of physics and stuff like that. So they will try and verify. They apply more verificationism when the theory doesn't make any outlandish claims. But when it comes to stuff that is really out there, like fringe stuff, instead of a pet theory, they look at it as, this shouldn't be able to fit our model, therefore we're going to really falsify it to the point where they end up dismissing it. Yeah.
Scientists try to keep things simple, and the way where I see this proof is with gravitation. So when Einstein first came up with the theory of gravitation, his theory of gravitation, which supposedly superseded Newton's gravity, it took a long time for physicists to be absolutely convinced that everything was actually what Einstein said and not what Newton said. And so even to this day, one of the early proofs that Einstein was better than Newton was Mercury's orbit. And then people said, you know what, maybe it isn't Einstein's relativity that causes Mercury's orbit to be strange. Maybe Mercury is slightly oval or shape or something. In other words, scientists always look for the simplest, least outlandish explanation. And so that's why they reject things like string theory and stuff like that, because because there's more parameters, there's more stuff that has to occur that we can't observe. They prefer to go with the thing that is the least, most compact, simplest explanation.
Occam's razor.
Exactly. And so that's why I think they reject spirit stuff, because it's much easier to go ahead and throw out a few anomalous results than it is to have to incorporate a whole new paradigm that's much, much more complicated and so poorly. And that's another issue with spirit things, is that we can't use a machine to measure it. You know, with gravitation, I can point a telescope at Mercury and map out its trajectory, and then somebody else can take the same machine or, you know, follow the instructions and make their own machine and get the exact same result. So machines allow us to reproduce our results over and over and over again. But when it comes to parapsychology and spirit stuff, it's very, very person dependent. And there's always this subjective filter in our experiences. Not to mention, it's very hard to measure, right? You know, you can have a lucid dream and measure your MRI, but that MRI is going to just tell you what's going on in your brain. It's not going to tell you anything about what you're experiencing. So that's I think the issue is that A, we want to keep it simple, Occam's razor, and B, we don't really have instrumental ways of reproducing the results.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It's just not fair. But yeah, there's so many.
But here's the thing. If you take the tenet, which I do, which is that the system was designed not to be hacked. I always get it wrong. And this came to me through intuition. It was designed not to be hacked. If you understand that, then you realize that the unfairness doesn't stem from your belief versus the materialist belief, but that we live in a system that is so cryptic.
Right. Yeah.
And so we should be blaming the people running the system for being so cunning with us, and being so, you know, secretive and not allowing people to see things in a clear way. I mean, look at Christianity. I mean, there are hundreds of denominations of Christianity because there's no way of adjudicating who's right and who's wrong. And so it ends up just bifurcating and bifurcating because there's no way of evaluating in any shape or form whether one direction is the wrong direction or the
That's right. Yeah. I was going to say, with Christianity, it's very easy for atheists to completely destroy it. Oh, there's a fire alarm going off. It happens sometimes. But yeah, I was, UK, yeah. I was going to say, oh God. Yeah, that's it. It stopped. Yeah, I was going to say, if you assume, like, take a story like Job, you know, the story of Job. He's faithful to God. He does everything right. But then the story goes that God decides to have a bet with the devil in order to test Job to see how he behaves, because the devil says, well, his faith in you, you know, he says to God, his faith in you is contingent on the fact that things are going so well for him. So take all of that away. That's where his loyalty to you ends. So they put that to the test. If you take that to, you know, to be a literal story, then obviously atheists are going to attack it and pick it apart. You know, they're going to say, well, if God's supposed to be all good, and if he's supposed to respect those who have faith in him, why would he do that to Job? It just seems unfair, you know, because he practically says to the devil, do what you will, and his faith will remain. If you take that literally, if you take God to be some kind of entity out there, and his dark angel also exists, and he's doing his work for him to test people, then people are going to start pointing at the contradictions. How is it that this God can be so cruel, right? But then you also get different interpretations. Like, say, for example, Carl Jung said that story doesn't really happen out there objectively. It doesn't happen in space and time. It's more of an archetypal story. It's more like spiritual. And he said you can interpret the whole story to be inside Job's mind. So for instance, Job is loyal to God, which means that he looks up to what he values the most. He can't help but worship that. He does everything in his life to progress, to make things go okay in his life, to be organized, to be orderly. And when things happen willy-nilly, when bad things happen, right, regardless of whether he's a good person or not, that's when he finally says, well, I've done everything right. Why is this happening to me? So in the story, that's when he looks up at God and he goes, why? And God basically says, well, he gives him a cryptic answer. He says, well, where were you when I laid the foundations of the world? You know, where were you when I laid out the constellations, when I did this and that and the other? And if you take that to mean that someone externally is talking to Job, then you think that's not fair. He only wants an answer to what's happening to him. So why is God being so rude on top of it? It's almost like God is blaming him. But really, you could also reinterpret that to mean that if God is everywhere and he's already inside Job and it's his psyche, then Job is coming to a realization, well, it doesn't matter whether I'm good or bad. The world was already there before I was born. It wasn't made just with me in mind, or it wasn't made just for me to exist in it. Things will happen willy-nilly, and I just have to find a way to accept what happens to me. So basically, it's almost like a realization. God's reply, it's almost like a realization that he comes to, like a eureka moment. It's got nothing to do with whether I'm good or bad. Things will just happen willy-nilly because they're already there. And the sooner I accept this, then the sooner I can move on and stop feeling sorry for myself. So that's what happens in the story. After he receives God's answer, as cryptic as it sounds, he finally moves on with his life, and then his life improves tenfold according to the Bible. So I almost take that to be like an archetypal story which doesn't happen at any one time. It actually happens all the time in human history with everyone at some point in their lives. I mean, what do you make of that? So maybe it's not that the Bible is completely wrong about everything. It's not that there are contradictions. It also depends on how you approach the Bible. So maybe the Bible is just a collection of archetypal stories.
Well, doesn't it sound a little bit, when you mention about this idea of allowing yourself to just accept the good and the bad, that has a little bit of a Buddhist flavor to it. This idea that life is illusion and you kind of have to just let it pass through you. Because if you hold on to it, if you hold on to all the riches that this illusion is giving you, you're going to suffer. But if you just let go and say, you know what, it's okay. I don't really, things, I can get rich, I can get poor, it really doesn't matter. I'm still okay. I'm still
I would say, I would say it's similar to Buddhism, but not so much Buddhism. I would say that it hints to a different approach. Not to say that you shouldn't, you should just accept it and you should just get on with your business and not let it affect you. I would say more along the lines of the Stoic philosophy, Stoicism. So basically, things happen, and you have to come to a realization of what you can and can't do. So there are things that you can control in your life to do with what you choose to do. Your actions, how you move your body, what you're going to do next. That you can control. And you can even control, I know you can have thoughts flare up in your mind, but you can also focus on what thoughts you're going to have or what decisions you're going to make, right?
Well, there's different choices. It's sort of like, it reminds me of the Choose Your Own Adventure books. You reach a point and you have some choices. You could either fight back, you could just say whatever, or you could say, you know what, I'm going to fight evil with love. I'm going to give to that person that took from me, to demonstrate. It's sort of like what Jesus would say, turn the other cheek, so there's like different choices you can make in these scenarios, depending on your philosophy.
I was going to say, that's why I said it doesn't have to be the Buddhist approach of not doing anything. It would be more along the lines of accepting the reality, and once you know where you stand, then you can go from there and do something about it.
Like, for example,
and then recognize that there are things that you can't, that are beyond your control.
Like, for example, you get rejected for a job that you applied for. You could say, oh, well, I guess that just wasn't meant to be. Or you could just keep pressing on and keep going and find another job and another job until you find the one that they accept you. In other words, there's different choices. Once again, it's you're right. It's not like, oh, forget it, I don't need a job. Jobs are illusions. It's just more of whether you choose persistence. But I think that the Earth game, though, is set up to be as immersive as absolutely possible. It's even in some ways more immersive than other games going on in this physical universe, or at least what we think to be in this physical universe, what I call like extraterrestrial races. In other words, other groups of societies may be better connected with their spiritual self and see like bigger pictures. Whereas in this particular world, we are locked down. I mean, we have almost zero perspective, except that we're born and we die. I mean, and any perspective that we gain is really hard fought. And I would argue that you could have a lot of lifetimes where you're just so lost in the illusion, you don't even know, you don't know heads from tails. You might reach a point in your soul's evolution where that aperture opens and you start becoming aware of things that don't meet up with the illusion that we live in. And it's only at that point that we're at where we know that we believe that there's a game going on here. But to a lot of people, that they don't even think that. They don't even hold that as a possibility, like our materialist friends in that video. I think they're still living within a three-dimensional perspective without opening up the possibility of another dimension. And
they're existential nihilists. They think there's no intrinsic meaning or purpose in the universe. We
Well,
create our own purpose.
well, and that is the result of not seeing out that bubble. As soon as you let go of that nihilism and say, you know what, I don't know everything, and maybe there's something more, and I'm open to it. Then only then can they begin that journey. But another thing too is, I could talk to people till I'm blue in the face. Everyone. It doesn't matter how strongly they're materialist or religionist or whatever. Nobody's going to believe me, because the only people that even give a hint of believing me are people that have had similar experiences themselves, right? Only NDE experiences, OBE experiencers, maybe lucid dreamers are even going to believe a word of what I'm saying. Everybody else is like my
No,
wife.
but there is another type of people that can also buy into that.
Mhm.
People that are very interested in consciousness, that didn't have any experiences at all, but they got to believe that. Like, for example, somebody that read Tom Campbell, the books from Michael Newton,
Yeah,
Seth, they didn't have any
true.
experiences, but for some reason they believe that.
Got it. No, I agree with you. I think there are people that look at it as like a religion almost. I hate to say it, but because
related, going back to when you said immersive, I see one point at least, that there is an advantage of don't being so hooked up to the game, let's say, is when somebody close to you dies. Because the typical, and people see you as weird, when somebody dies, you're supposed to be sad, right? I mean, if you tell me, oh, you lost somebody, you lost this person, the typical reaction, everybody expects that you're going to be sad. But I mean, I am the weird one. I don't know about you guys, but when somebody dies, for me, he's the lucky one. He's the lucky one. Now he's fully in the non-physical. I wish I were him. Right?
Yeah.
Because right
It's just-
now, we have to make so much effort to get certain non-physical access. And when you're dead, you get it. I mean, you don't have to make, I think you have to make much effort to connect telepathically to whatever you want. You don't suffer, you don't have to eat, you don't have to go to the bathroom, you don't have to feel pain.
Generally, I would agree with you. The one thing I question is, just because I explore a lot these, I would call lower vibrational realms where spirits exist, I wonder how many of them are fully aware of what they're capable of, versus ones that, they realize they're dead and they realize they don't have any problems, but at the same time are kind of stalled in their development, where everything, where they don't necessarily take advantage of all the rides that the amusement park of the non-physical offers, to use an analogy.
Yeah, but that's the example. We had similar conversations in the past. It's like you say, you said I went to Europe, and how was Europe? I said, oh, I didn't like it at all. But I mean, where in Europe? And because, for example, if you go to Europe, I don't know, but there might be some places in Serbia, let's say, I don't know, or some country that you go to a bad neighborhood, and then you get a very bad impression of Europe, but you haven't been in a lot of places in Europe, so your account for your impression of Europe is not the same as somebody else, right? So,
well, if you're saying that I'm the one that's only going to the bad parts of Europe, the problem I have isn't that, because I can also go to the good parts of Europe, is that I don't know that all spirits flexibly move from the bad parts to the good parts. That's what I'm concerned about, is that I feel like they don't even realize what's available to them. So I've been to good parts, I've been to bad parts, and I feel like the difference to them, it's almost like they're fixed in position until they're elevated or they're told they can go somewhere else. Whereas to me, I can just kind of go in between them readily. And so that's what I'm worried about, is that they don't realize all the opportunities that are open to them. They're kind of stuck within a certain level of understanding. And maybe that gets improved over many lifetimes. But once again, we get no education in this lifetime about the travel possibilities there, right? Christianity teaches you that when you die, you're supposed to wait in sort of like this waiting area until Jesus comes back and resurrects you, right? So you're given all these limiting beliefs that you kind of take with you. And some people don't have that limits, but some people do. And it's like, why is that? Why are we so uneducated here that we don't even know what's available there? That's what I've been doing lately, is interviewing these people and asking them, okay, so what's up? Do you talk to your guides? Where do you go? I mean, and it ranges depending on their awareness.
Yeah, but you don't get the full information, I think, because let's suppose they tell you, I get stuck, I cannot do it. But maybe if you talk to a guide to say, why can't they do it? Because I'm suspicious about getting stuck. That's something I want to research on Seth, about, for example, beings getting stuck, again, not being able to move from whatever, like being a ghost trapped in a house or something. I don't know exactly how real that is.
See, once again, it's my experience versus what you've read or what you believe. I can't explain it. And when I'm there, I think to myself, why is it like this? It doesn't have to be like this, but it is. It's so, it could be that what I'm seeing is only 10% of the population, or 5%, or 2%.
Wait a minute, because when I say it is, but you're not 100% sure that they are real beings there, stuck.
I don't know what percentage of their full personalities are there. It could vary.
Yeah, but you're not sure that they are free beings with free will. You're not at least 100% sure.
I mean, they communicate with me. I mean, we can get into
but they can be
into how much cognition they have.
Can they be NPCs? Even if it's not NPCs all the time, but can it be 80% of the time?
I would say that on very rare occasions, I've run into thought forms that seem to not think. Most of the time, they are thinking rational individuals. Now, they don't necessarily have like a full memory bank of who they were, but I mean a full memory bank of everything. But they are more. There's different levels of cognition.
But wait a minute. You shouldn't judge for being rational. An AI can be super rational. It can be more rational than the normal guy. I mean, if you talk to an AI, I mean, a normal guy can give you contradictions. And you talk to an AI, I can be very precise. I can talk to an AI about idealism, and they can give better answers than myself. So by judging by how rational they are, that's not the best judgment.
Well,
it's not about free will.
I'm not saying rational is. I'm judging based on the questions I'm asking. Like, who are they? Where are they from? What year do they think it is? I'm not doing an IQ test with them.
No, but the amount of information doesn't give you any clues either, because an AI can be very precise about the knowledge, about the information of something.
I was going to say that the AI can pass
the key is to test for free will. That's the key.
You can imagine an AI passing the Turing test, and yet the AI isn't conscious, or you can make the argument that intelligence, or the appearance of intelligence, isn't evidence for consciousness. I think what's his name? Nicholas Humphrey, the guy who wrote Sentience, the Invention of Consciousness. He's coming from a materialist standpoint, right? I don't subscribe to his theory, but he makes a point which I'm going to use here, because it makes a clear point. It divorces intelligence from consciousness. He basically reckons that only mammals and birds are conscious because they are warm-blooded, and that somehow the homeostasis generates enough energy in the brains to create feedback loops and the feedback loops become self-referential, you know, and then somehow consciousness emerges from that, which I think is wrong. But he makes a point that an octopus, like reptiles, lizards, snakes, all of that, an octopus can display high levels of intelligence, but isn't conscious. But a chicken is conscious and yet doesn't have a lot of intelligence, doesn't exhibit much intelligence. So he makes that case to divorce intelligence from consciousness.
Yeah, because the key is on free will, because you can have a dog that in general dogs are not more intelligent than humans, right? But a dog, you open the door. I mean, let's say you have 4 dogs in a house. You open the dog. I mean, the dogs are gonna not the whole 4 dogs are gonna. Well, it might happen that the 4 dogs want to get out, but some of them, one of them might want to get out faster. The other one might want to get some food. I mean, I assume at least that they have free will. So it's not about their intelligence, how intelligent they are. It's about whether they have free will or not. If they don't have free will, you would expect all the dogs maybe to do something similar, right?
One thing that Humphrey observed about dogs, right, and about mammals and even birds, he says that what might be evidence for a creature having sentience, having phenomenal consciousness, is the fact that when they move around, I know there are good cases for saying that behaviorism isn't a good way to try and prove that, you know, a creature is conscious, but he does make the point that when dogs move around, and just like humans, they tend to play with the experience of qualia. So when you throw a ball, the dog will chase the ball, then even play around with the ball. It's almost like they explore the world of qualia. And that kind of behavior, you don't see it in reptiles or mollusks, or, you know, they don't exhibit the same kind of playfulness that you see.
Yeah, but I mean, if you have a robot, and the robot might be programmed to catch the ball too. So how can you tell? You throw a ball and a dog that is a robot, they go and get the ball and bring it back to you.
But then you would have to, true, it doesn't definitively prove that you know, something is conscious, but there is definitely a distinction there to be made between mammals and birds and the way, say, a lizard behaves. A lizard never plays around with the world of qualia. It's almost like the lizard doesn't have it. It's almost like the lizard, the way the lizard behaves, is closer to an automaton than a conscious being that perceives the environment and plays around with it. Does that make sense?
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I didn't do much research on that. But another thing to take into account is there is also a distinction between being conscious and having free will. Because let's suppose you're a being without free will. I think it is possible that you can get qualia. I mean, you can have the qualia, but not being able to do any other way. I mean, you can see red, explore red. You can still like ice cream, but you cannot choose not to. I mean, usually I predict that somebody without free will tend to either have random choices of ice cream or have a preference, a predefined preference, right? And if there is a reason that they change the preference, should be because of some software or hardware reason. I mean, predetermined, right? Not because they are aware of the choice.
Guys, I need to take. Oh, sorry. I need to take a little break. Should I?
No, anyway, we already been recording for a long time. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, what's the best way for me to zone out with your system? Or it's going from 2 to 3 rooms things anyway.
What?
Like, you want me to turn off my camera? Do you want
no. But by the way, one more thing I wanted to say.
Yeah, we're about to wrap
it's
up
kind of
anyway.
like obvious before I
Yeah.
leave, is that I think for people, for materialists, for people that don't believe in anything like that is not normal, let's say, is to keep it simple, because we in the conversation we focus on is it coming from our own minds, or it might be an external source. So don't even entertain what is that external source supposed to be. If it's paranormal, non-physical, afterlife, as long as it's keep it simple. Is it coming from ourselves or not? Because I mean, the more you add to a materialist, the more you're gonna get a reaction back. Because for example, you mentioned supernatural. Oh, come on, get out of here. You mentioned, especially you mentioned soul. Oh, get out of here. No, you keep it simple. Is it coming, for example, dreams? Are you coming from you, from me? Or is it a possibility that they're coming from an external source? So in the video with Arlindo, we made an analogy. Is the computer getting the pictures from Windows, from the operating system, or it comes from they come from the internet? So we can explore that. What is more reasonable? That the information is local or is not local? So, well, if you want to go, you can go.
No,
was
I like
thinking,
that. I like that. It's because it's easy, like you said, if you use certain loaded terms, people can go off on a tangent, and we want to keep the distinction clear. Of course, when you use local and non-local, you can start arguing physics principles, but I feel like that is a little bit.
Right,
That can
because
go on a tangent
we were
too.
talking about bringing people from different religion ideas, both atheists and theists, to the conversation about the non-physical.
Okay.
And we can bring both types as long as they are open to be open-minded, skeptical.
yeah.
Well, we should grab we may have to kidnap him, but Matt Dillahunty, we just without his we can't let him in the same room with Mr. D to support him. We gotta, and then we turn on the hot lights,
Yeah.
No, but it would be interesting to at least have a vocabulary with them. And even if we disagree with them, we can still say, hey, I believe that all of my cognition occurs locally, and I believe that my cognition is a mixture of local and non-local elements. And in this way, at least we've now made a non-mushy, distinction. It's a very clear distinction. And
also, yeah, it's also very, very convenient. I think you, Arlindo, might know more. Well, you might know that too, Michael. A typical phrase in quantum mechanics, quantum physics is non-locality.
Yeah.
So by saying, bringing the name non-local, non-locality, you sound like a, like a scientist,
you should
right?
change. So instead of being nonphysical.com, nonlocal.com. I joke.
It's kind of like, no, but anyway.
No, and that's what I was saying, that locality, non-locality get into like physics arguments. But even if we're not arguing the physics, we're just simply trying to use as simplest term as possible to describe information within within my system, my physical system, and information outside of my physical system, which I can receive with my five senses, or then we at least have a starting point. I honestly, if this were a game show, he would win, right? Because he could just rack up points and saying, well, did this person know something before they, in other words, our five senses provide a lot of our information in our daily life. Our non-physical sense, I would say, makes up a fairly small portion of our information intake. Would you agree with that? That it's like in everyday life, how much comes how much comes from the non-physical and how much comes from physical stimuli?
Probably when we're talking about the default mode of going about our business on a day-to-day basis, when we're focusing on the mundane, I think what you said is accurate. But then obviously if you're gonna, you know, relax and zone out of the mundane, and then you start focusing on that tiny percentage of what's beyond it, then obviously you can increase that. I was going to say what we were saying about Matt Dillahunty. His epistemology is sound about most things, but I think where he goes wrong is when he assumes that materialism is true, you know, and he tends to say things like the mind is what the brain does. So he would say that dreams are just, you know, fictions that the brain generates. But then again, if you're going to claim that with certainty, then you have to demonstrate, then the burden of proof is on you to demonstrate that dreams come from inside you. The burden of proof is also on you to demonstrate that that consciousness is a byproduct of the brain, and you can't do that.
Right.
So
Another thing that we were talking about is that what makes more sense when you, especially when you're in a dream with, let's say, five other people, other characters, and you have a conversation, right? And everybody has different personalities. Somebody might make you cry, right? So do you have to believe, is it reasonable to believe that you yourself are making yourself cry? I mean, you invent without knowing, without being aware, you invent something to make you feel bad, and then you cry. Does it make sense?
Well, so the problem is that we don't, because the brain is still like a frontier that we don't know completely. It's easier for scientists to say, you know what, the rendering engine comes from your brain, even though we don't know where it comes from exactly. We know that's somewhere we believe that's somewhere in the brain. By the way, we believe, and all those characters that you generated are sub-processes that we're just not aware of yet, that we haven't found yet, but we know that if we keep digging, we'll find it. So that's a belief, right? Once again, they're taking what I would call the dark matter of the brain and using it to explain all the things they can't explain. Whereas we say that the dark matter, there's not just the dark matter of the brain, but there's also the dark matter of a consciousness field that we haven't explored yet that explain these things. So we're both debating, but neither of us have a definitive answer yet.
Oh, regarding I just realized that I have a question that we should ask most of the materialists mainly. When they contemplate about a channeler, somebody that's channel an entity, I wonder what is the typical assumption? Because one assumption would be that the guy is lying, right? So basically, I'm saying, okay, I'm Claudio. Do you want to talk to Sam? I say yes, right? You say yes. We want to talk to Sam. So ask Sam a question. And you say, okay. So go ahead now. Ask Sam a question.
What's 1 + 2? You know, and
I am Sam. 1 + 1 is
3.
3? No, it's 2. Okay, so what happens? I'm lying, right? But in dreams,
by the way, you would make a great channeler. You've already got the voice down.
In dreams, we don't do that, right? In dreams, I mean, when you ask in dreams, they assume that it's myself, not faking, not lying, but it's my own mind split into at least 2, right? So then, when Sam talks to me, my mind goes one way, and then the other way. But I don't think they assume in channelers that it is like in dreams, right? That like the mind is split, like they're not faking it. So basically, when I was pretending to be Sam, it was really my mind without me knowing becoming Sam.
So I know what you're saying. It's the debate I had about the first book that I read on the paranormal, which was John Edwards' book, which is there's 3 possibilities. A, he's lying. B, he thinks he's telling the truth, but he's delusional. And 3, it's real. So there's that distinction between lying to yourself and truth, right? It's
because one thing that I'm giving the skeptics a reason is that we don't know the where the source of the information, or what is the source of the information. And if somebody's channeling something, I say, I would assume that the information is external. To me, it makes more sense. But if I am assuming without more evidence that it's an entity with free will or not, I think that's extrapolating too much. I can say it can be both. It can be an artificial system, or it cannot. I mean, I had to get more evidence to speculate whether that source is a being with free will or not.
Yeah, and that gets to
being external is kind of obvious to me. It makes more sense than without being aware of it and something hidden in myself doing the thing.
Yeah, but it's sent through so many filters that by the time it comes out your mouth, it's coming using your vocal cords, perhaps your voice. You know what I'm saying? So it's, unless if I could create a device, a physical device that shows the person I'm channeling, and it shows their face and their expressions and everything, then that gets rid of the uncertainty, because it's always having to pass through a human being who's a very powerful being to begin with. So that's the problem, is that everything is happening through the filter of a human, whether it be a human experience or a human voice. So until we can make it into a third thing, like a computer doing it, and then we know exactly what the internal workings of the computer are, so we can determine whether or not it's external or not. It's impossible.
I think from what you were saying, there is something that can be done, because, for example, it might be a bit unrelated, but I saw some videos on YouTube about they were using AI tools to guess whether Vladimir Putin on videos was the real him or not, because they were speculating about being somebody else, being doubles of Putin.
Deepfakes. Yeah.
So they use AI tools to
like deep fake?
Speculate about the probabilities that it was the real Putin or not. Maybe AI can help in what you were talking about. What do you think?
So this is related to the concept of writing styles. So, for example, even with the Bible, what they've done is a language analysis to determine that there's like X number of people that wrote the Bible, because the writing styles are slightly different. So in the same way, you could use AI to determine mannerisms, speaking style, frequency, all the language content. And you can use all those as metrics to determine whether or not it's the person you claim it to be or something else. But it's imperfect. It's imperfect because the AI is going to get better and better. I mean, one day an AI will be able to create a Putin that another AI won't be able to determine is in fact fake.
Something that I don't know if anybody tried this, but with these channelers, I don't remember seeing anybody. But for example, when they what is this guy Anka Polanco? Daryl Anka channels Bashar. I wonder if we can ask him to pretend to be Bashar and see how he sounds when he pretends to be him, right? And do an AI analysis. Do an AI analysis comparing him pretending to be Bashar on purpose and him being Bashar.
That would be interesting.
Also you
see what the AI can detect the difference between the two.
Well, you could also, so for example, let's say he can't do that. What you could do is take a good actor and ask them to act different types of people, like Robin Williams would have been great, but there's people that definitely, they in real life they sound completely different than who they act in person, and so you can develop a metric or something that helps you understand the range of abilities of a normal human being, and you could assume that he is in fact a normal human being and that his acting range can only go this far, and then you could determine whether the channeled entity is farther. What's one of the best proofs though is women that sound like men when they channel. That's I always find interesting.
Another thing
that's true. But once again, it could be acted. I mean, it's not that a woman couldn't act like a male if they tried.
But one thing that can help is when you change the language. if somebody channels with a different language, but let's see how they do when
has anybody asked Bashar to speak in perfect Spanish when we know, or when we can assume that he doesn't know perfect Spanish, for example, right? Because Bashar should know 20 different languages. So, and Daryl, I assume, only knows a few at most. Let's get him, let's test him on language proficiency in different languages. Nobody's going to do that, though, because that's a real experiment.
Yeah, I was going to say, we mentioned Paul Tholey's research on dream characters, because he was working on this hypothesis that dream characters are conscious. Mm-hmm. And the results from the experiments, because he had like a bunch of lucid dreamers as his subjects, mm-hmm. to ask the dream characters questions and to ask them to perform certain tasks. Mm-hmm. And the results from the experiment were that dream characters were really good at verbal tasks, but really bad at arithmetic. So they were so bad that you could say that they were as bad as an infant. You know, you could ask them questions like, "What's 2 + 2?" and they would say 5. And then, "Are you sure?" And then they would say 6. And then, "Are you sure?" And then finally, maybe you would get to the right answer. They would say, "Oh, 2 + 2 is 4." But more often than not,
just like ChatGPT, doesn't it?
Maybe it was an AI, but without without a lot of data on arithmetic. They had.
But that's a really cool experiment. But those are the kinds of experiments we need to do more of. And once again, it's not somebody that's spontaneously experiencing non-physical experiences, but somebody who can dial in, do the experiment, dial out, record the experience. And we need more of that. And that's the problem also, is that we don't have a lot of funding. You know, what we need is a billionaire who believes in the stuff, who's willing to fund us to be able to do these experiments.
Yeah.
Like Bigelow, maybe.
If you are there and listening to this.
Yes, if you're a billionaire on the line, please call our hotline.
And the conclusion could be that most dream characters are just like Cleverbot. You know, the Cleverbot AI. That's really bad.
But without much information on arithmetics, because I mean they cannot even do a.
True, exactly.
Yeah, and can channelers channel in arbitrary languages? That'll be another experiment we can add to the list. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Try finding someone that can channel, that's willing to do that experiment and put their authenticity on the line. Good luck. They'll make excuses.
Geniuses.
What?
They could turn out to be mathematical geniuses.
Well, so what Daryl Anka claims is that he's channeled Bashar in front of like university physicists. And he said that the physicists were happy with the results. Now, I don't have the scientific studies showing what actually happened, but it'd be interesting to see if we could.
But there's no videos we can watch about that.
I know. Wouldn't it be cool to have a bunch of physicists in a room and Bashar explaining his physics, and they're like, but what is that really? Are you really saying that, or are you saying something else? You know. And then,
you know what Matt would say. Matt would say, "Well, that's anecdotal." It's not really.
Definitely.
We know what he said that they said, but that's all right.
Yeah, no, well, that's the problem. Would you be willing to put your non-physical hypothesis to the test with him? I mean, or would you say, you know what, channelers are not really 100%, legitimate?
Matt Dillahunty, right? If he had done his show prior to the 70s, when lucid dreaming was proved in the lab, he would be parroting the common view from the scientific community of the time. He would be, if someone called in to say, "Oh yeah, I had a lucid dream," he would be saying to that person, "No,
that's not possible." Right.
It's impossible. Yeah, exactly.
No, you're right.
So
lucid dreams transitioned from the impossible to it's okay.
Exactly. To it's okay. So I do think that he's so focused on his own show and his own ideas that he's not really paying attention to say some of the breakthroughs that we've seen, like since last year, and in physics and some of the conferences to do with consciousness and how divided the scientific community really is.
the tragedy is that you don't have 100,000 followers like he does, and you can spout your opinions in the same way that he spouts his opinions, because right now it's 99% materialism, 1% us.
That's right. That's right. But then again, he goes on about, apparently he's an expert in logical fallacies. And I've heard him before with some callers say that, because someone called in to say that there are billions of people who believe in God, therefore God must be true. And he said, well, you're appealing to the ad populum fallacy. But then again, he also hypocritically appeals to that very same fallacy, because he's claimed, even in the Jamie call, he's claimed that he's not an expert on anything. I don't know if you caught that, Claudio, but he did say to him, I'm not an expert on anything. And yet he goes by the popular opinion within the scientific community that materialism must be true, or is at least the default mode. No,
you know what's funny is we're also in this weird time period after COVID where distrust of science has never been so high. And one of the biggest logical reasons that people claim that science is bad isn't that scientists are bad people, or that is that we're influenced by who funds us. And so therefore we feel compelled to not lose funding. So therefore we shape our results and our,
if you have a PhD and you work for the government, you don't have to trust that person.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well,
so we shouldn't take your word, Michael.
No, you shouldn't take a word of what I say. But see, that's the thing. It's interesting because in my job, as most government employees, is we have to evaluate things to determine what's the best choice for the government. And we try to do that as unbiased as possible. We try to look at the data, because, at the end of the day, I feel like it's the people that are going to say, hey, this is not something we wanted, or this was a bad investment. So I don't feel like I'm beholden to anyone except what I think to be the truth. Although the truth, of course, varies. I don't feel like I'm beholden to who's paying me. I feel like I'm beholden to finding the reality, the truth of the situation. It's like science. When I do science, I try to do something. The results I share, I think, are reproducible. If they're not, that would be my biggest sin, is that I'm telling you something that doesn't hold up when you do it, for that exact same experiment. That is the biggest sin in science.
Yeah, there's also scientists also get peer pressure from politicians or heads of state, for example.
But if I'm going to claim, some scientists do, but I really feel like at the end of the day, when I do my scientific work, I don't want any of my scientific colleagues redoing exactly what I did and what I claimed I did and getting a different result, and then saying, well, what the hell were you thinking, Mike? That to me is the biggest sin in my profession. It's and if I'm being influenced by money, then it's not going to hold up, right? Because if the US government claims it's true and then another government finds it's false, then that's just bad science. I mean, and to me, I don't feel any pressure to publish something. That's another thing we put in our things. We put a disclaimer saying that this is not the opinions of the government. This is the opinions of the authors. So we are we're very careful not to claim that any results or conclusions we come up with are not actually ratified by politicians. They are simply ratified by the people who wrote the study. Who are trying to defend their science.
It's better to blame Michael Lee than blame the U.S. government.
Well, no, I mean, no, because at the end of the day, if I'm going to publish something and then it turns out what I said was completely wrong, that's a mark on me. I mean, the government is already distrusted, but at least my name should have some sort of,
I was thinking more along the lines of say like someone like Trump employs you to, during the beginning of the pandemic, employed you to be a spokesperson, a scientific spokesperson for COVID and the latest findings on COVID. But then before you go on the podium to speak to the world about COVID, Trump says to you,
you're going to lose your job.
I said this before, Don't make me look bad. Don't contradict me. Find a way to make me look good. You know, if you,
I'll take out my Sharpie. I'll take out my Sharpie and add that big piece of land that the hurricane.
I'll have you killed.
I think when you're closer to the
believe me, you forgot to say believe me. This is a bigly thing.
Believe me. This is trust me, bro. He needs to add the bro to his.
No, he says believe me.
Believe me. It's
Arlindo says it's the best.
We have it.
It's bigger than you've ever seen.
Yeah, he says bigly.
Bigly. This is big.
Yeah, Arlindo. So you have to find some wig, so you can impersonate Donald Trump.
But you know, the way I see the
We're gonna
world
bring
now
Donald
is
Trump
that
to the physical channel.
the way I see the world now is that everybody's opinion times their influence factor is what's stirred into the pot. So if you have somebody that has a very large amount of influence but is a total idiot, we're screwed. Because that's how the world works these days. And it's unfortunate, but you know, if Taylor Swift got on national TV and said, stop taking that COVID vaccine, it's bad for you. You know, we've just lost that many more people who are not going to take the vaccines. You know, and so I really, this is the world we're in. It's almost like a democracy and it's a weighted democracy. You know, people always say that the stock market is democratic. No, it's money weighted democracy. In other words, the larger amount of money you have, the more you can influence it. So it's the same way of public opinion. If Matt Dillahunty has 100,000 followers and I have 5, he's going to have more people spouting his views because he's winning the popularity battle. There's no way around this. It doesn't matter if I'm right and he's wrong. He wins.
Yeah, everything's politicized, basically. Even science.
Well, that's the other problem too. Yeah. So when I read papers, scientific papers in my area, I have to look at, were they worried about publishing this because they needed to look good, or do you think they're just being honest with me? And I trust a lot of people. It's pretty rare when we catch somebody in science that's faking, and it does happen, and that is like the kiss of death for their career. They can't be scientists anymore because they've demonstrated that they lied in order to get ahead, and they're done. I mean, they're done.
Suicide in science.
So that's why I also try to separate my beliefs in science. I mean, yes, I am a scientist and I have beliefs in things, but I'm not going to publish a paper saying anything about those beliefs anytime soon, because that's going to put my what little left I have of my reputation on the line.
That's right.
The other thing too is I feel like I can talk about things, like I talk about retrievals because I've had tons of them. I may be more hesitant to talk about things that I don't have as much experience in. So that's another thing too. In other words, if you're going to argue something based on belief, you know, how much do you believe it? How much can somebody change your belief? I mean, what if we could convince you to be a materialist? Do you think you would be a materialist, or do you feel like at this point in your life, you're like, there's no going back? I'm talking to Arlindo. Yeah, because
no, for me, there's no back.
I care about the truth, and I tend to go by a saying, I'd rather a cold, harsh truth than a consoling lie. So I wouldn't like to think that just because I find idealism more compelling now, that it's because I am in love with it. I'd like to think that the reason why I'm subscribing more to idealism now is because the evidence is pointing towards it. You know, what sounds more convincing to me, because from the perspective of materialism, there is clearly a problem. You know, the hard problem of consciousness, for example, that's one of the problems with it. There's an impasse.
What if in 20 years, though, somebody does something? I know the joke is 20 years ago, bet it, and it never came out. But what if, you know, I don't know, somebody does a really cool experiment, and you're like, wow, I didn't know that. You know, would that change your mind? I mean, or would that get you to start thinking? Then
I'm willing to have a paradigm shift. If it's true that for some reason consciousness really does emerge from some type of physical configuration. You know, if it comes down to maybe the frequency of brain waves and what angles the particles are coming from, or you know, whatever
some
it
really
is,
weird,
something really weird, and the universe really works that way, then I'll have no choice but to accept it. But for that to be accepted, it has to be compelling. The argument has to be compelling.
Yeah, but let me give you an argument about this. Let's suppose I am on the other side, right? I'm the architect in the architect in the Matrix movie. You say, okay, if I discover something new about in favor of materialism, then I'm gonna go more into materialism, right? Okay, as a designer, I can modify the brain of somebody. I can put some code, like memory code, that would favor materialism. So basically, I am changing the software, right? It's a software manipulation that can be taken as evidence for materialism.
Well, you can see that that the architect already did a lot of patchwork to ensure, and it's a multi-revisional thing. This reality that we exist in, this is all intuitive, I would argue is actually like the 100th version of the software, or the 100th version of the hardware, or whatever. But it's been iterated over and over again until they reach this point where it's like, wow, this is bulletproof. Now, it never is completely bulletproof, but it's good enough for now. I mean, certainly in this age, it's still quite effective. I mean, it's a pretty, I agree that you can find holes in it, but think about it. How many people think as deeply as you?
Yeah. By the way, Michael, you know, when you said, what if an experiment in 20 years' time convinces you that materialism is true? That reminded me of the bet that Christoph
that's what I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
so
this was already done once. Yeah. And it never.
And basically, Christoph Koch lost the bet because it didn't yield the results he thought it would. It didn't solve the hard problem of consciousness. So David Chalmers, in the end, won. So it's almost like that's already been done. But then again,
another 20 years.
What's not to say that in 20 years' time it will be even more refined, and maybe they will be able to.
Well, okay. So the flaw, I think, with a lot of popular materialists is they don't really understand the science well enough to know that there's still some dark matter left and that we don't know everything. I think that's the problem is that they just kind of cut it off and say, well, it looks good enough. We're done here. So they're not going to get into the weeds of the things that still haven't been explained. They're going to just look at the bigger picture and say, well, you could do an MRI scan and read your thoughts. So your thoughts are in your brain. We're done here. You know, in other words, they're not going to go into the intricacies of the arguments. It's the same thing with, this is the thing that annoys me is the science explainers by most of society are considered the world's best scientists. But from scientists' point of view, yeah, they're good scientists, but they're not like the world's best. They're just the best explainers. And so you look at, you know, the Carl Sagans, the Neil deGrasse Tysons, and you think, oh my God, these guys are just gods of science. It's like, to scientists? Nah, I mean, yeah, they're good scientists, but they're not gods. I mean, they're just like me. I mean, they're much, much better at explaining things and they're much more popular than I am, for sure. But
it's funny. It's funny that sometimes the scientists need the philosophers to help them think about the results they get from their experiments.
Oh, absolutely. And science explainers, I think, also inspire the next generation. They inspire people that when they're in college thinking about what they want to do with their career, do they want to become a scientist themselves? So in a way, they play a very, very important role. And without them, we would be screwed completely, because you just have people like me babbling on and on with 5 followers. You know, so at least, you know, but at the same time, if a science explainer says, you know what, we're done here, materialism is the truth, then then people now believe that all scientists believe that materialism is the truth. I have a colleague who's a really diehard Christian and actually wrote a book about how he felt like that religion was missing in science, that it's like a missing piece, and you can't use science to explain it. So or at least not yet. So it's so not all scientists are atheists by any stretch of the imagination.
We could even say that some scientists are religious about science itself and materials. Yeah,
that's right.
It's all
the religion, and in a way, like you're describing, they're accepting that certain things will be discovered if you just give it enough time, versus the alternative, which is they'll never be discovered, and because they're outside of the reality that we exist in. I would argue probably the religious scientists, in other words, the people that are like Christian, I would argue they believe that we do, that the physical world is merely just one aspect of the greater creation. So I think they would, and they would say there's nothing wrong with studying this, as long as you understand that there's more than this.
Let me give you guys an analogy to see. I think it's a pretty good one. You have a video game, but let's say from our perspective, from science perspective, you don't know the code, but you have access to see the game, right? So you see the game and you can study the game and you can notice some patterns. And you can guess what the code is. The code would be the math, the equations of physics, right? Mainly. But then when you want to study the players, then you have more trouble. They're not as consistent as the game. So, and that is science trying to investigate the non-physical. It's not the same as investigating the game itself. It's like a different ball game. It's not as consistent as the game.
So scientists would say, or materialist scientists would say that because humans are so complex, it's just going to take us longer to understand the laws of humans than it does to say understand the laws of a supernova. So they would just argue it's a complexity issue and nothing else, that we just don't know. And it's the same idea that, we'll find the physical manifestations of consciousness. We just don't know all the complexities yet, but it's somewhere in there. So that's the disagreement, right? That's the fundamental disagreement, is that to us, humans are complex because we're outside of the game. To them, humans are complex because they're just made up of a lot of mixtures of the equations.
Yeah, but actually some neuroscientists are actually bringing that to the table, that they say, because some people keep being optimistic, saying, materialist, from a materialist point of view, that eventually we're going to find out in the brain, for example, we should be able to extract from the brain all the information that we have, all the memories, and maybe hidden memories. Like you can extract information from a hard drive. But we are not able to do that. So some people are starting to think, maybe the reason we are not able to do is because materialism is false. So you're expecting to find something, but you're never going to find it. But we have to keep waiting. We're playing the waiting game in both sides.
So Kurzweil has a book that talks a large part about this, because he's coming from a materialist point of view, and his attitude is, since human bodies are fragile and we eventually die, we need a machine that can literally read all those memories and then store it on a more secure device so that you never lose that person. So from his perspective, we just need a bigger microscope and a whatever in order to extract all the memories and extract that person and then put them now on a computer. Whereas from our perspective, you can't do that because there's parts of us that just simply don't exist.
Well, now I remember Mikio Kaku is one of them, that he's been saying this for a while, I think, that we should be able to upload all the information from some human being.
All right.
We should be able to store it in a computer, and then humans can live forever, because if you have the information and you can manipulate the information stored in some media, you can keep living forever.
Yeah.
No,
So-
not with a human body, but
So it's interesting. Materialists are very much building their own golden calf. They're essentially creating their own god by saying, hey, at some point we'll be able to upload all the memories, put it onto a nice secure place, Amazon cloud. And you'll get a few advertisements in your brain, but other than that, it'll be you. Yeah. So no, I mean, it's really interesting. It's almost, to me, that kind of thinking is like redundancy. It's like we already have a backup memory of our memory in the non-physical, but they want to create another backup in the physical. So it's interesting.
Oh, Arlindo, why don't you repeat about that guy? Maybe I think Michael might be interested. That guy that put a chip in his brain.
Oh, Raduga?
Yeah. Raduga, yeah. And I think he.
Yeah, we were talking about him.
Yeah, he's performed brain surgery on himself because he wanted to be able to control his lucid dreams and make them longer and be in absolute control of it. So he decided to perform brain surgery on himself and insert a microchip in his brain. And I think he posted some of the results, but
he did it in June of this year.
Yeah, he was willing to risk his life for it, for the cause, you know, and he lost like pints of blood. And yes,
I assume, if we work backwards, I assume he's also worked with like eyeglass device. You know how we've been talking about like sleep masks that like every time it detects rapid eye movement, it uses red light and stuff like that. I assume he's done a lot of that too. What?
Yeah, on his website.
I don't know anything about that. No? You
know? I think he came up with something similar to Nova Dreamer. You know, Stephen LeBurge's.
Yeah.
Nova Dreamer.
I'm not familiar, but yeah, I mean, so I would be curious to use those devices too. I mean, because I think those are not invasive. They won't harm us, but they could extend our lucid dreams and give us more experimental time. So
yeah.
Did you guys see about the ping pong balls that was posted in?
Oh yeah.
Saw that. Yeah.
I don't need to do that, but no, I mean, but if I could get I mean, you know what I want?
You might wake up.
So here's what I want. If somebody who does lucid dreaming and then started using the device and found that they were able to increase their lucid dreams by a factor of 2, 4, I'll spend the money and buy the device. I just don't know if they actually work or not. So I'm not willing to throw the money in until I have some confidence that it works. What do you guys think?
Another thing we were talking with Arlindo before was that if I change right from when I was a kid to now, that now I get my visualizations better. Mm-hmm. I mean, if from a materialism point of view, my brain should have changed, right?
Possibly. Yeah.
Right. It could be a good subject to study, right?
We talked about hyperphantasia.
What?
So basically, because Claudio has done so much visualization over the years, by now we should expect his brain to have changed, especially in the visual areas of the brain. We should expect it to be really developed. And
we should be able to close his eyes, block out all sensory input, but then measure tons and tons of optical, what do they call it? Optical buffer or whatever activity going on.
Yeah, something like that. But there is something curious. I don't know what you make of this, Michael, but what they found is that when you lower the excitability in the areas of the brain that are to do with visualization, if you lower the excitability using artificial methods, you increase the quality of the visual experience. The imagery suddenly becomes stronger.
Yes.
But under materialism, wouldn't you expect the opposite? If you increase the excitability of these brain regions, you should expect.
Well, so initially I was thinking, that's a great proof of idealism. But there is one electrical engineering thought, which is that when you reduce signal, you pick up more noise. So it's like, so it's possible that the receiver that's looking for visual turns up its amplifier in response to no sensory input. And so that is then what creates all the, basically it's amplifying a bunch of post sensory thinking. You know how like you close your eyes after looking at something, you see like a residual image. So maybe things like that might start to be amplified more because of the lack of other.
Yeah, like an.
I'm just throwing it out as I'm standing up for the materialists. No, I'm checking.
No, that's fine. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mary's room problem. So Mary's a brilliant scientist. She's inside this. Oh, hello. So
I was trying that. I never tried.
I see.
I don't know if it's gonna be recorded or not, but
Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's cute. We need to add it more often, especially after somebody spends 10 minutes talking.
Yeah.
Hey, who has the next birthday? We don't know about mine is in April 20. What about you?
Mine's on the 26th of May.
Oh well, we're all in a cluster. Yeah.
What about you? When is yours?
I'm June. I'm late June.
Oh, so mine is the next one. Oh, okay.
Hey, we'll buy you the we'll chip in and buy you the Lucid Dreamer. No, I'm joking. Okay.
I don't think we need it really. I mean,
I would like to increase. I mean, I find that I lucid dream maybe about 10, 15, 20 minutes a week total. I know people that lucid dream for almost like several hours a week. So I want to increase my my lucid dreaming.
Maybe we should volunteer to Elon Musk for his company.
Yeah, to fund us.
Well, I did have that dream once where Apple intuitives were talking to me and saying, hey, you could join our Apple intuitive team. You know, like somehow they were like these remote viewers working for Apple. Who knows? It could just all be in my imagination.
Yeah. I was going to say one last question about Mary's room problem, right? You know, she's in a black and white room. She's a brilliant scientist. She knows all there is to know about color. And usually the question is, when she goes outside, will she learn something new? If she learns something new, then materialism is false. But I was also thinking, when she's inside the room and all she's seen is black and white all her life, when she closes her eyes and she presses against her eyeballs, you know, when you see like, not the after image, but the, you know, you see like
yes,
colored stains.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you see,
you're stimulating your retinal receptors. Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. So, what does she see?
I don't know. By the way, white is a terrible color because white is all three colors at once. It's all three wavelengths. Yeah. So that's a terrible example, but red and black maybe. And then
in general, they say, in general, I think the most common case is when somebody is born blind, that they don't experience colors. But
or they don't experience any visual for that matter, or at least that they know of.
I wonder if we could make somebody blind visualize. That would be a nice achievement.
So Robert Bruce was able to help people go out of their body who were blind, and because he focused on feeling rather than visualization. So anyways, that little factoid.
Yeah.
All right.
What's that brain condition where people are blind, but they actually believe that they can still see until you get them to move around, and then once they start stumbling around, then they realize, oh, I'm actually blind. They actually showed this condition in one of the medical programs. I think it might have been House, you know, the series House. And one of the doctors, he somehow poisoned himself inadvertently. And then all of a sudden he became blind and he was stumbling around. And people were saying to him, you're blind right now. You have this condition. You're blind. And he kept saying, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I can see. And he was so convinced he could see until he began to stumble around. And then he realized, oh my God, I'm barging into things. I'm bumping into things. I can't see anything. Only then did he realize, oh, I'm blind. That's really strange.
No, but maybe he was visualizing.
Yeah, maybe he was imagining.
Maybe he was visualizing.
Like,
Maybe the brain was not the brain. See, there is a tendency to speak as though materialism.
Don't worry, Claudio's just an NPC. You shouldn't be.
We forgive you. We forgive you.
I was going to say maybe the brain is making something up to fill in the void. You know what materialists say. But yeah.
Actually, we can do also like jokingly say, hey, my brain is saying Merry Christmas. Oh, my brain is saying thank you. Oh, yeah, really? Are you sure he said that? Maybe like joking. I mean,
yeah, you can.
Well,
never
it's
be sure.
What do they say? My brain says no, but my heart says yes. You ever hear that? Expression.
Yeah.
So who are you now talking, Michael or your brain?
Actually, it's my heart that's talking.
Yeah, no. That's
okay, guys.
It's time to say goodbye. Maybe I think this is the last recording of 2023.
Oh, okay.
I guess, right? Because more likely. So Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas,
Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah.
Thanksgiving there, don't you? Have you had it or?
Yeah, we already had our Thanksgiving back in November.
How do you say Merry Christmas in Portuguese?
Feliz Natal.
Feliz Natal. It sounds like Italian, right? It's similar to Italian, maybe.
Yeah, it's similar.
It sounds like happy birth.
Natal. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's like birth. It could have something to do with the birth of Jesus. Maybe that's why.
Well, the original idealist of the Western world. Yes. All right.